Yo, Tundra, welcome to our extra installment for the Snowy Bevelix mod guide series. Today we're going to be going over quite a few updates, starting with updated mods, optimizations, as well as adding in landscape LOD or level of detail, object LOD, VWDs, so view and distant, and a new mod that I recently published a couple days ago, distant LOD VWD for water in Cyrodiil. I will show you guys all of the changes that I've made since the last video, some feedback, and again, some optimizations. Then we'll dive into the landscape LOD, water LOD, and object LOD mods to really take your Oblivion to that next level with minimal performance impact. I also want to address some bugs and known issues that we've stumbled upon since our last video. First off, I totally forgot to put the Darnified UI, paste these lines under fonts for in your Oblivion Ini in the folder tree up to this point. If you're watching this now, the updated version will be available on the Nexus mod page, but you're going to need to make sure that you put these in the Oblivion Ini and apply the new fonts for Darn, otherwise your game will crash to desktop or CTD. These will be in your guys' interface Darnified UI folder, and it'll say paste these lines under fonts. You open this up, you'll be able to see these fonts now. Sorry, I totally just forgot to put these in your release. Next are some issues that have seemed to arise with people using Kvatch rebuilt, and specifically the Rescue Minion patch, which comes in during the bodies armors section of our build. I've now marked all of these. Anything involving Kvatch rebuilt is optional, and in fact I would actually recommend uninstalling anything that is Kvatch rebuilt if you don't want to deal with the extra additional hassle. And you'll see this when you go to the Kvatch rebuilt mods. You'll now see if you want graphics only, skip all three to avoid hassle, but I'm going to be using this for the playthrough series. So if you uninstall the Kvatch rebuilt segments, the cleaned invasion states, the no burned ground, any of that kind of stuff now, the Rescue Minion patches, the HGEC armor patches, the Robert's Mail armor patches, go ahead and uninstall all those if you would like to not deal with Kvatch rebuilt. I really like the slight change that it has on my playthroughs and what it adds to the world, even graphically. For me, which we're going to dive into later, the distant LOD, both with object and landscape, are going to be represented through Kvatch rebuilt and some of the mods we've installed. So Kvatch in the distance will appear to actually be a fully fledged city and be integrated with the rest of our world as we're playing the game. But once again, uninstall them if you don't want to deal with any potential crashing. I've seen quite a few comments on our YouTube series with people having to uninstall Rescue Minion and the build for their Oblivion being unstable after the installation. I went ahead and tested up through the Kvatch rebuilt quest line with rescuing Minion and making sure Minion integrates with the camp, and so far it has worked absolutely fine for me. But you're going to need to make sure you're uninstalling the pre-invasion state. You're going to have to uninstall the no burnt ground. You're going to have to uninstall a few distance LOD mods if you're going to want to use Kvatch rebuilt and make sure it looks not buggy. So it's a bit of a hassle, but if you're okay with that, then look into the mod a little bit and continue moving forward. You guys will now see under the more mods, edited mods, an optional live series specific folder. So these are recommended from me for just improving your experience. Now this is extremely subjective, so skip all of these if you don't want to use them. The only one I would maybe recommend to everyone is the Colored Quests OBSE. This is amazing. I've included install instructions with each of these if you need help. If you open this up, it'll say Snowy dragged this into Rybash, installed underneath GoGo Torch Hotkey, my custom one that I made. Colored Quests allows you to get these really fun little icons appearing when you get quest updates and when you look in your quest log journal. And it's really nice for different quest lines to be able to easily denote and distinguish all of them. The next is Balanced Creatures Sensible Creature Health. All this does is rebalance the HP scaling for monsters at different levels. So for example, with this mod, skeletons will actually have a little bit more HP at level 1. The skeleton guardians are going to have significantly less HP at level 8. And skeleton hero spawns, they're going to be at 180 versus 280. So this will really just reduce some of those HP sponge enemies in the latter end of the game. When you're hitting, let's say, an ogre 50 times, this now may only take you 30 times. It is entirely optional. You don't have to get this if you don't want to. Then by the same mod creator, there's a balanced NPC, sensible NPC health. Then there's Gentleman's smart level scaling. All three of these were recommended by the mod author of Gentleman's smart level scaling overhaul, Sand Gentleman. And I decided to test this out myself, and I absolutely love this. This is one of my favorite changes to the game I have made so far, where these three mods, the sensible NPC, sensible creature, in addition to the Gentleman's smart level scaling, which you can see some of the values here and how they've been altered. It might seem extreme, but it makes the game feel much more modern in a way that I've been really enjoying. Again, you don't have to install this if you don't want to. Feel free to skip all of these. Next is Knights Improved Infamy. What this does is it overhauls the infamy system being reset with Knights of the Nine. I think this is a huge quality of life improvement. It actually will allow you to continue to have an evil, infamous reputation amongst the masses, while also allowing you to wear the knight's armor and being redeemed under the gods after performing your duties. I won't spoil anything, but this is highly recommended. But of course, you don't need to be downloading this though. Next is the Mercantile Experience Fix. Now this mod is supposedly fixing a bug with the original game, where mercantile skill leveling would go up incredibly slow and only operate per barter session rather than per item sold. So what this does is allows your mercantile to increase at a level that makes sense to what the developers originally planned. Now this is supposed, I don't actually know if this is true or not, but it feels much better, and this might even allow you to grind for a mercantile 100 rather than having to rely on trainers to try and max out your mercantile throughout your playthrough. And that's all for the live series specific mods. One thing you will notice is under the updated mods, under architecture and cities, there's now Gecko's Ayleid Replacer. I replaced CatCat's 3 Ayleid mods with this. Those 3 mods were Base Metal Decor 4096, and Unofficial Oblivion Patch Matches. I uninstalled these, and I replaced them with the mods you will find in folder 12, Updated Mods, Architecture Cities, Gecko's Ayleid Replacer. And there are 3 mods for this as well with some fixes. Now I highly recommend Gecko's Ayleid Ruin textures. These are fantastic looking. They're much more vanilla-esque, but more importantly, the interiors are a little bit brighter and have significantly more frames. An example would be in Vilverin, when you would first enter this Ayleid Ruin at the beginning of the game. I would sometimes dip down into the 30-35 FPS range. Now, I'm at a consistent 65 capped FPS in most Ayleid Ruins. Obviously, this will fluctuate a little bit, but has significantly improved using the Gecko's Ayleid Ruin textures. This also will match our new Object Distance Ayleid level of detail, or LODs, in the distance that we're going to be showing off here in a few minutes. I installed all 3 of these: the Gecko's Ayleid Replacer, the Ayleid Ruins Fixed Mesh Replacer, and the Ayleid Ruins Meshes Fixed for Gecko's Parallax. If you would like to know where I installed these 2 specifically in my Rybash, all I did was replace them in the identical location as CatCat's Ayleid Replacers. So with CatCat's, I right-clicked, I clicked uninstall, I started with the 3rd one, uninstall, and then I deleted it from my Rybash. I did it for the 2nd one, right-clicked, uninstall, deleted. Did it for the 1st one, uninstalled, and deleted. These are the Base Metal Decor, and the Unofficial Oblivion Patch Meshes that CatCat released. And then I took the zip files from Gecko's Ayleid Ruins textures, and I plopped them into Rybash, and I installed them in the exact same location. So I dragged the installer all the way up to be underneath the VK7 Oblivion Cathedrals. Then I right-clicked and installed all 3 of these sequentially. And that's the updates on all the old mods and the new mods up to this point with the current build for the live series. There's one other thing I wanted to mention before we move on, and it's that I released my EMB series INI. If anyone would like to go and download that directly or compare it with the one that you have to see some of the tweaks I made, I released the interior update on the 9th of January last week. And for the specific changes, you can scroll down to installation and click show spoiler, and you'll see I changed the bloom interior amount, the camera FX lens reflections, and the environment's ambient lighting intensity interior. You can adjust these and tweak them to your own settings, but make sure you adjust the amount of contrast corresponding with your bloom values. If you have any kind of wonky colors or anything, as you adjust these values, make sure you look at both the bloom contrast and the environment's ambient lighting and kind of play with those values. I found that these were perfect for the new Gecko's Ayleid replacers we're using, as well as the current fort and cave and mine interiors. Some locations might appear a little bit bright, and again, you can turn that down, maybe ambient lighting intensity down to 1.2 instead of 1.4 if that is what you are feeling like. Also, there was a planned alternate version of mods I was trying to put together that didn't have the .ru or any kind of potentially IP banned sites for some of these mods and where they're hosted. But unfortunately, I could not find many replacers. For a lot of these, just simply don't use them if you cannot access them. Additionally, if you're going to be looking for some of the TD mods or mod links, they should be in the updated folder, but directly here you can find some of those links. I went ahead and chose to use TD's unique anvil. So the anvil retexture we were using before due to some reflective inconsistencies with lighting points. TD's unique anvil felt much more vanilla-like with new textures, and I'm enjoying them so far. They're a little bit less dilapidated compared to the other anvil we were using, but I have chosen to do this and replace the anvil retexture with TD's unique anvil in the same place in our load order. I uninstalled our old one and just reinstalled the new TD unique anvil. Now, if your TD unique anvil comes with an ESP, just do not activate it, and you won't have any changes to the city of Anvil. Same with any of the unique cities like Skingrad. Additionally, you can find the TD's tombstones, lower clutter, and alternative book covers here. I went ahead and took Sancrane's post from Bevelex's list and threw it into our posts on the Snowy's graphical overhaul page. Someone commented on our YouTube regarding where should we sort link.esp, because every time we run boss doesn't recognize link ESP. This ESP should always be loaded last. That way any other mods that might be configured to work with link, which is an in-game mod configuration window. And so I've chosen to just put in boss GUI, sort link.esp, and you can see in the bottom rule editor, make sure you read this here. After bash patch, and for me it was bash patch, comma 0.esp, space 0.esp, I created the new rule, and then I saved and exited. And now make sure this is like the last rule. So anytime you add new rules, you're going to want to move this down to the very bottom. You're going to click on it and you're going to click move rule down, just to be safe and that your boss GUI is reading all of these correctly. You can opt to do this at the very end of today's guide video after we get to our LOD VWD segments, since we are going to be installing a lot of ESPs. But you can see after I have made this boss rule, we no longer have any unrecognized plugins currently. I want to mention that the VK7's mods on the moddb.com site went down briefly after we posted our guide and some people were unable to access their mods. The site appears to be back up, but occasionally the sites like this, including Nexus, will go down temporarily. These luckily were all restored, but you can also find older versions of VK's mods over on Nexus. Now the VK Cyrodiil map also has a matching intro that I have chosen to download and install as well. since the time of our last video. It's beautiful. It's a reimagined look at the intro, a 1-to-1 apparently with the frame lineup as well from VK, where the background map is replaced with the new VK's map that we're using, which is, I think, an amazing touch. One thing I'll note, if you guys end up using Kvatch Rebuilt, make sure you download the optional PDF file. In this PDF, you'll be able to find a full walkthrough on how to initiate the Kvatch Rebuilt sequence. There's quests involved, and we also have a mod that gives the NPCs voices from AI generation, which sound awesome. I've had a little bit of time to play with it, and I'm really enjoying it so far. Again, if you chose to skip Kvatch Rebuilt for the headache, then don't worry about this. So let's go ahead and dive into what LOD and VWD mods will do to your Oblivion installation. Here's a slideshow of photos I took of my installation both before and after I installed the View While Distant or Level of Detail mods. You can see in this particular photo, there's only really one distinct difference, and that's that there's some of these larger boulders that you'll be able to see in the background, as well as the Frostcrag Spire now perched on top of the Gerals. You cannot see it previously. Some of these photos are here to show you how little the change can be, but also how massive it can be, depending on where you are in Cyrodiil or the Shivering Isles. Next is overlooking towards the Imperial City. You can see before that there is no detail here. The Frostcrag Spire is actually cut off on the top left, but you can see that on the top of the mountain. But look at all the little boulders and rocks that are going to be missing from this particular install. Also, notably, are Ayleid ruins and forts that you'll be able to see in the distance. And these are these LOD lines I was talking about during the install that you will see with some of our landscape generation, unless you use GIMP or another photo editing software like Photoshop to blur these. Obviously, you can see the Ayleid ruin down here. You can see that this is the white tone of the typical Ayleid ruin in vanilla, which is what the Gecko's Ayleid replacer will look like if you choose to go this route, which is why this matches. There is a CatCats VWD version you can get of these ruins from J3 as well, which I believe is linked in the mod folder. So big shout outs to the wonderful LOD VWD creators out there, as your mods have heightened these installations to a new level. In this photo, the most notable changes that you're going to be seeing are in these hills. You're going to be seeing another Ayleid ruin. You're going to be seeing these large boulders in the distance, another fort, I believe. That might be another Ayleid. You can see Kvatch now in the distance as well. And now here in the before photo, you cannot see all these things. In fact, even the LOD generation, even though we're using the pre-invasion version of Kvatch, the trees are still appearing as burnt and destroyed. You can see here, the generation allowed these trees to appear as normal for our pre-invasion state. This next one is really here to just show how nothing really changes in some of the close range renders, but you can clearly see the difference in the Ayleid textures in this photo of us switching from CatCats to the Gecko's replacer. Again, it's optional, but the reason I have chosen for Geckos is the performance. These perform far better in my world. I've actually seen huge improvements in my frame rates around ruins and around landscape in general. Anywhere near these Ayleid ruins in the distance and the interiors, things are much smoother for me. In this photo, this is a more of an I Spy type situation. But first thing to note is that water reflections are turned off now that I'm using the View While Distant mods, as I'm also using a mod I created for water, and adding additional reflections throughout the world significantly comes at a performance cost. So I highly recommend making sure your statics, misc, object, actors, and trees are all off for your reflections. You can opt to turn some of these on if you are willing to lose some performance and to lose some frames. I've chosen to turn all of them off except for reflections, so we're still going to get reflections. We're just not going to be getting all the small reflections, which you could argue make the game look far worse having off. But something you'll be able to notice here immediately are the rocks in the distance, as you can see. Then you cannot see. They are gone from this picture here. Also, the castle from Breville in the reflection on the water, you will now be able to see, and the cathedral, as well as a cheeky fort behind the strange door in the distance. You can see that it is not here, and now it is. So these are the small little changes that you're going to be seeing in your world. Here's another one where, beautiful photo regardless, but the before has this tree alone, which actually almost looks better just because of the aesthetic of having this single lone tree perched on this hill. But you can see in the after photo, it draws in one of the very iconic mushroom trees of Dementia. And you can see how the lighting will affect these as well. Oh, and these have been modified by ULP, another View While Distant mod. Here's another one here in Dementia, and you can see that beyond this route, only a few trees are generated. Look at the difference. And the irony is that we have reflections all turned on in this left photo, and in this right photo, we only have reflections on. Everything else is turned off, and look at how beautiful this looks. You can see so much more detail in the distance and in the background. Fully drawing in this mushroom tree again, as well as another in the background. And now we're on to the mod that I have made called Snowy's Water of Cyrodiil. Now I've made this for Cyrodiil and the Shivering Isles, and I'll go ahead and show you guys my mod page now. This is my Water of Cyrodiil Distant LOD VWD mod that I recently released. I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys some photos from this mod to complement our other object LOD. Now, something to note is that these water statics in the construction set count also as an object. So when we start generating these LODs through another mod called Slow LOD Gen, this is when my water statics will be placed into your world. And so this is some of the before and after photos of Water of Cyrodiil. This is overlooking a lake near Shadenhall. And one thing to note is that the object LOD has already been generated, so the Ayleid ruins, the forts in the distance, all of the extra details of rocks and things like this are already present. The only thing that's not present is my mod in the before photo. And so you can see a lake that you normally wouldn't be able to see any water in is now generated. The reason this is the case in base Oblivion is the engine didn't allow for water to be viewed at a, rendered at a distance if it was above sea level. And so because this is on a hill and it is above the level of the sea around the Imperial City, it is not generated. My mod allows these pools to be filled in. Now this is based around another mod, which we'll get into the installation details shortly. But you can see this entire lake is added in. And you might think, oh my gosh, you can see a whole square of water here. This is actually land that's jetting out on both sides. I went to go patch this thinking, oh my goodness, I must have messed up this particular pool. But no, this is actually a piece of land that complements this lake, adds depth to the environment. You can see in this photo, this is on the hills outside of Shadenhall, looking west. And you can see in the before photo, you might think this looks fine. Looks okay. Looks beautiful. But in the second photo, you can see the extra detail of water and what that provides for this scenery. In this photo, it's a little bit more subtle, but if you could spot the water, then kudos to you. There's 3 pieces of water in this photo, so if you want to pause and test your skills for those 3 different locations. Alright, so the first one's on the right side of your screen. It's that same pool of water, but on the lower end of it. There's a little waterfall that it drains into, and this is the lower pool of that same pool you saw in the previous photo. There's also that lake from earlier in front of the Ayleid ruin you can see. That's above the sea level. There is also water appearing as it should in the city of Cheydinhal, finally. Even with the land bridge intact that you can clearly see from a distance. Here's another angle, except this time showing another lake added on by Lord Drad's estate. You can see here, and you can see that. You can also see the landscape generation lines. And also an Ayleid ruin. How beautiful. And you can see once again the water and the lake on the outside of Cheydinhal also filled in. You can see that distant lake from earlier. And look at the detail. 2 Ayleid ruins in view here. There's also another water pool added here. Now this is going to be the Shivering Isles edition of my mod, which I actually think is what inspired me to make this in the first place. I was exploring the Shivering Isles, and I was actually looking for beautiful screenshot locations for Snowy's Oblivion. And I plopped myself down here near this settlement. There's a settlement south of this photo, and I started walking up north, and I noticed that the water looked really pretty. And as I got closer, I realized it started generating in. But I was standing here in the center, and on this side of the lake, it wasn't fully generated, it was clipping. And I look over here, and it was the same issue. It was like part of the lake was not being generated. So then I fly into the sky and find that none of the water in the Shivering Isles above the sea level was also not generating. So I went ahead and patched the Shivering Isles. At six different locations. 33 static were placed. Here are 3 lake pools that I added in. You can clearly see all 3 of them here. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3 that you normally should be able to see. It's noticeable when you're standing on these ridge lines. It's very noticeable. This one was perhaps the most noticeable to me, is walking up to Bliss's entrance, which is actually featured in the showcase video. And if I turned my camera to the left, because my view distance was so far, there was a line just beyond this little jetty of land that where the water was not being generated or rendered. Additionally, there's an entire pool on the Dementia side as well, kind of swampy area with some heretics behind New Sheoth that I also fixed. You can see clearly the before and after here with these pools. This is Cheydinhal, but viewing it from the southern point. And you can clearly see this one needs no explaining. This is the lake just outside the Imperial City, outside of Wei, and next to this fort, which also normally cannot be viewed without the VWD mods we already installed up to this point, which I will get into later. We haven't done that in this video yet. But you can see this lake here is now filled in when it is normally just a hole. And that's all the photos I have for you guys. One thing to note about my mod is that it doesn't cover all the small pools of water throughout Cyrodiil or the Shivering Isles, because the landscape generation mods we use end up sort of flattening and darkening the spots where water normally is to sort of give it a pseudo pool of water look in the distance. Not sure if this is intentional or not, or if that's in the base game. So what I've decided to do is just save some resources and the amount of resource bloat that's in my mod by not adding it to all the small pools of water throughout Cyrodiil or Shivering Isles. Now for the installation guide for the optional LOD update folder number 13, where we're going to be having The updated mods once again showing that you do need to make sure you change to Gecko's Ayleid Replacer if you decide to do this, or use the compatibility Ayleid Ruin patch by J3 on their mod page on Nexus if you're going to continue using CatCats. I would strongly encourage moving to the Gecko's Ayleid Replacer if you want a very, very performance-friendly Ayleid exterior and interior. In addition, we're also adding a new mod, the Avsithis. I'm not sure if I'm saying that wrong, but it might be Avsithis engine fixes, which are compatible. I've already tested it. They are compatible with our other engine fixes we're using. Here's some install instructions. I put it directly underneath enemies keep weapons in inventory in Rybash, or above your torch hotkey mod of choice. You just drag it in, move it to that spot, right click, and install this before moving forward. Now we need to dive into LODs, starting with landscape. The reason we want to start with landscape is this allows us to set sort of the height maps and the fields for the object LOD and our water LOD to be loaded into later on. A quick note before we dive into the install. On the Snowy's Water of Cyrodiil's mod page, you scroll down to the installation tab, you're going to see a thing that says click show for landscape LOD guide if you need. If you know how to already or you generated it, skip. If you click show, you will see everything we're about to do in full detail. So if you do well with a written guide, this is here for your pleasure. So go and open up that folder, and the first one you're going to see is a missing texture install. So you can go ahead and extract this. You can open up your Oblivion folder, and you're going to put this into the textures folder of your Oblivion. What this is for our landscape generation. There's a few missing textures. These are them right here. And this will allow us to output our landscape LOD from the software without any errors. And again, this goes into textures landscape, not the textures base folder, but textures landscape right here. And you can just drag and you can just drop that in. You can go and delete the original folder. All right, next is going to be the landscape LOD generator files from Tezol. You can go ahead and right click extract. And this is a quick reminder to go ahead and make a backup of your Oblivion in your Steam Apps Common Oblivion. You'll see that here. And also you can back up your saves as well as your My Games folder altogether, which is going to be on your C drive, users, your account. For me, my OneDrive, documents, My Games. And you'll be able to see that here. It's going to be the Oblivion. You can copy all these and save them and back them up if you would like. After you've extracted the landscape LOD generator 515C, go ahead and open that up, and you're going to put this into your data Oblivion folder. All of these files and folders, you can just click them and copy them into, not a particular folder, but to copy them into the actual data section of your Oblivion. All right, next you're going to go ahead and open up the MPGUI folder. And you're going to see I have two quick guides and references here that I found on Nexus that were incredibly helpful. If you would like to also get another opinion or another perspective on how to utilize this tool, you can go ahead and extract the file. And you can go ahead and run the MPGUI setup MSI. That's at least what I used to install this program. And I installed it right next to where I have Boss. And so that's going to be next to Steam as well in my games folder on local disk C. You're going to see MPGUI. And this is what it looks like once it's installed. Go through all the processes to get installed. Say yes to anything that it requires. So this next step's pretty important. We're going to back up your landscape LOD meshes as well as your landscape LOD textures if you have any. And what you want to do is navigate to your Oblivion backups wherever you have those and create a folder for landscape LOD or a folder for your meshes and your textures that we can put files into. So here I have a landscape LOD generated folder that I'm going to be using for my backups. So navigate to your Oblivion folder, go to data, textures, landscape LOD generated. And I'm going to go ahead and take anything I have in here, and I'm just going to copy it and paste it into this newly made folder. Now, if you didn't have anything there, it could mean that you didn't generate any landscape previously, in which do not panic. You can also back up your textures landscape folder to be extra safe as well, located right next to the landscape LOD folder, if you have any files there as well. Next, navigate to meshes and find landscape LOD, and you're going to want to copy anything that you have in this folder and also save it to another folder. I'm going to go ahead and copy these and paste them. Now that you have your textures landscape LOD backed up, as well as your meshes landscape LOD backed up, we can now move on to the next step. Go back to your Oblivion data folder, go into ini, tesall, and you're going to open up the tesall.mpb file. You can just double click that, and you should be getting this in your console. Mine did not open up or load properly by trying to run the MPGUI where we installed it. I have to specifically click this file to get my MPGUI to work. If yours keeps crashing, keep on attempting to reopen it until it works. This GUI is notoriously unstable in its current state, or on our current operating systems. Click plugins, click plugins text, and then click world space and click read world spaces. If it crashes like this, you're going to want to just reopen it. Click plugins again, plugins text, world space, read world spaces. Until it works. So mine worked on the third try. It can still crash later on, but just keep in mind it's very normal. Now click on LOD meshes. You're going to want to make sure make LOD meshes is checked, as well as everything in the options for vertices placement. I changed the normal grid to fine grid. It's all preference. Normal grid is totally fine. Now for resolution, I much prefer ultimate resolution. I think that this works very well on a lot of modern systems, but if you're worried about this, go ahead and do high or mid resolution. Go ahead and click normal maps and select make normal maps. For graphics options, I went ahead and went with 2048 by 2048. You can go with the 1000 option. It's not going to be super noticeable, and it might save you some performance. Click fake shadows, can take a while. Next, click color maps, regenerate texture cache, make color maps, and leave this as 1024. I selected create full map of word space. A lot of people do not. I've just chosen to do this, and it's worked fine for me. I like to apply a Rocky filter. This allows your landscapes to be a little bit darker in the far distance, rather than the sort of radioactive color that some of the distant Oblivion landscapes can have in comparison once you see what this actually looks like. If you want it to be a little bit lighter, especially in areas around Anvil and the Gold Coast, because this can be kind of dark, go ahead and change the top value from 0.9 to 0.5 and the bottom value to 0.4. And this will be a little bit brighter, a little bit closer to that vanilla look, but it's still going to be dark enough to really take out some of that pale flush that the landscape can have in the distance. Next, you're going to click Start Process, click Overwrite the original files, and this is why it says please make a backup before checking this option, which we just did. You don't need to change anything else here. Under Tool Options, ideally you would have this come out as a DXT5 or a DXT1 compression, but I have yet to see the utility working on a Windows 11, maybe 10 machines, but I haven't seen this work for a while, and many people on the posts for this GUI reported that this hasn't worked for them. And so what we're going to do today is show you guys how to turn them from BMP to DDS files. We're going to convert them. So I'm going to click None, Needs Other Tool to convert BMP to DDS. You're going to click that, and then you can click me if you are ready. This will take a while to generate. Leave it be, and if it crashes, you're just going to have to run through this again until it works properly. While it's generating, you might get a command window pop up, and you can see the work happening in the background on the MPGUI if it's working correctly. And again, it's going to be going into our landscape LOD generated folder, and they're going to be BMP files. Alright, so when your command window closes, at least for me, that's when my MPGUI was ready. It'll say background render finished. And then background error reader finished. We can close the MPGUI now. So you're going to notice the files that were output were BMP files. We need to convert these to DDS to be able to be read by the game. And because the MPGUI hasn't been working with the conversion and compression, we're going to go ahead and convert these manually using another utility, which is actually going to be the 5th folder here in our landscape LOD, BMP-DDS converter. So what you can do is you can go ahead and extract this. I'm going to go ahead and put it next to the MPGUI, my Steam folder, my Oblivion backups, Nifscope, Boss. And so you can open that folder. We only need TextConv. And so I'm just going to copy this over. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the extracted folder. When you open up TextConv, this might look confusing, but we're going to be putting all of those generated BMP files into its input, which should be empty for you. If it's not, make sure this is empty. Copy all the BMP files and paste them into this input folder. And make sure output has no files in it as well. I went ahead and tested between the DXT1 compression and the DXT5 compression, and I believe I liked the DXT5 compression more, if it was even noticeable. But we're going to go ahead and use the all to DXT5 and normal map mipmaps conversion bat file. Don't use the one that is not capitalized. For some reason, this one wasn't working for me, but this one was. So go ahead and double click this. And you're going to click go ahead and run anyway. And you can see that it's reading and writing outputs. And you can see the outputs are DDS files. That took 3.7 seconds. Go ahead and press any button to continue. And you will now see all of our files are now converted and compressed into the DDS format. You can go ahead and delete Control-A in your Data Textures Landscape LOD generated folder. Go ahead and delete anything that's in there. Control-A, delete. We're not going to put these back in yet because we still need to generate the Shivering Isles DDS files. So what we're going to go ahead and do is take these output DDS files, and we're actually going to copy these. And there should be 100 of them. That's how many I have, at least. Now I'm going to make a temporary Tamriel or Cyrodiil, I'll do Cyrodiil, folder. And I'm going to paste all those DDS files we just generated in here. So we can put these back into our generated landscape LOD when we're done. We just need a temporary space for them because we're about to use TextConv again. So go back to Text Converter, and you're going to go ahead and go to the output and Control-A, delete everything after you've already copied these to a Cyrodiil folder. Go back and delete the input as well. Control-A, delete. And now we're going to navigate back to our Oblivion data folder. And you're going to go to Ini, Tezal, and before we open this, we're going to be downloading the 4th file in our folder, the Shivering Isles height map. So we need our height maps to be correct, and as it sits, the MPGUI and the landscape LOD generator files don't have a simplified way of reading the Shivering Isles height maps for its landscape. So Ferrum made a utility. It's an ESP file that we're going to temporarily load into the MPGUI. So go ahead and download this. It's going to be a Google Drive link. We're going to go ahead and extract the file. and you're going to see there's just an ESP file. So go ahead and get to your Oblivion data folder. Copy this Shivering Isles height map fix.esp. si_hm_fix.esp. Copy this and paste it into our data folder of Oblivion. Do not enable this in Rybash. Do not boot up Oblivion. Don't do anything with this in your data folder except what we're about to do. Navigate back to the tezall ini section, which again is going to be Oblivion data ini tezall, and you're going to run the tezall.mpb once again. Click plugins text, but also manually scroll down and find si_hm_fix.esp. Check that. Click world space and click read world spaces. Mine read correctly first try. My first time doing this took like 5 to 10 attempts. Once it reads, you're going to click this drop down where it says Tamriel from Oblivion ESM. Change this to SE World Realm of Sheogorath 000009F18 from Oblivion ESM. Make sure it's this exact world space that you are clicking on. Click LOD meshes. Make sure make LOD meshes is checked, as well as these 3 options for vertices. I went ahead and changed my normal grid to fine grid, and mid resolution to ultimate resolution. Make sure you click the right one that you want. Next, select normal maps and click make normal maps. I changed this to 2048 by 2048 with fake shadows enabled. Select color maps, regenerate texture cache, make color maps. Leave this as 1024 by 1024. I clicked create full map of world space. Apply Rocky filter. I recommend choosing the same Rocky filter you chose for your Cyrodiil world space. So for me, it's going to be 0.9 and 0.8, but once again, you can change this to 0.5 and 0.4 respectively. Then you're going to click on start process, override the original files, and then you're going to change the tool options from DDS DXT5 compression to none. Needs other tool to convert BMP to DDS. And you're going to click me if you're ready, and if it crashes, just re-attempt. Okay, once your command prompt window closes and it says background render finished and background error reader finished in your MPG UI, you can go ahead and close that. And the first thing we're going to do before anything else is immediately delete the Shivering Isles height map fix.esp. Go ahead and take that out of your Oblivion data folder and just delete it. And now navigate in your Oblivion folder, back to your data, and go to textures, landscape LOD, generated, and once again you're going to see some BMP files. This time these are the Shivering Isles BMP files. Go ahead and hit Control A, copy those, or select them all, copy them, and put them into the input of the TextConv folder that we extracted from the download. Put it in the input, the BMPs, and run once again the all to DXT5 and normal map MIP maps bat. That'll be much quicker because there are less files. Then go ahead and make sure that they are in your output. I have 16 items. I'm going to go ahead and delete the BMP files out of our landscape LOD generated folder. And I'm going to take all of these, copy them, and I'm just going to paste them into the landscape LOD generated folder. And now you can delete these as well if you would like out of your TextConv output and your input if you would like, or you can just delete TextConv. I'm going to keep it just in case I need it once again. Now navigate to that Cyrodiil folder we just made earlier with our Cyrodiil landscapes. Go ahead and select all of these. I just use Control A, copy these, and paste them into your landscape LOD generated folder. And I have 116 items in this space now. All right, now you can also delete that Cyrodiil output folder if you would like, or leave them there for a backup. You could have done that with the Shivering Isles files that we just deleted if you want to take those out of your recycle bin. I'm going to go ahead and delete them, as I can just quickly regenerate new landscapes if I need to, using the MP GUI. All right, give yourself a pat on the back for making it this far. You've just generated your higher resolution detailed landscape. Before we move on to the fourth folder, Object LOD, go ahead and navigate to where you have Boss GUI. I want to make sure that your Boss GUI is set up to load any new ESPs properly before we get to our Object LOD ESPs. So I installed my Boss next to my Steam. And go ahead and open up Boss GUI and click Edit User Rules. Okay, so the first thing to note is that I did change the improved chests.esp to be now moved and sorted before NAO Brighter Nights.esp, as you can see here. And while you're at it, go ahead and make sure that the following ESPs are in the correct order, as if any of these are out of order in the user rule list, Boss will unrecognize them even if you've made the rule. So make sure that NAO-brighternights.esp is sorted before NAO.esp, or in the user rule section, it says after NAO.esp. Also, I went ahead and made sure that NAO.esp is sorted before falling leaves.esp. And whenever you make these rules, click Save Edited Rule, and you can also move them up and down. Move them in the same order that I have them in to make sure that Boss doesn't unrecognize them even with your rule created. Make sure that you have the Potion Replacer ESP in the right place as well. Oh, and make sure that you moved the improved chest.esp after NAO Brighter Nights ESP. Move that rule down below NAO Brighter Nights ESP, because then it'll break the load order as well. If you ended up installing any of the live series specific ESPs, make sure you make the following Boss GUI user rules. Go ahead and type in the rule editor for balanced space creatures.esp. If you installed this, sort item before improved chests.esp and click create new rule. Next, you're going to sort balanced NPC health.esp after balanced creatures.esp. Create new rule. If you install Gentleman's Smart Level Scaling Overhaul, put the Gentleman's Smart Level Scaling Overhaul.esp before balanced NPC health. And again, balanced NPC health says it's sorted after, but I did click sort before balanced creatures ESP because remember it sorts from the bottom up. So that's how we are organizing these. Again, Gentleman's Smart Level Scaling Overhaul.esp, sort item before balanced NPC health.esp. Next, I sorted Knight's Infamy.esp before Gentleman's Smart Level Scaling Overhaul.esp. I clicked create new rule. Then I sorted Mercantile space fix.esp before Knight's Infamy.esp. Make sure that your before or afters are matching mine on screen here. Now sort smartgreeting.esp before mercantilefix.esp. Again, it's confusing because you want to make sure you're paying attention to the rule editor, not the rule user, the user rules on the preview. Now sort coloredquests.esp before smartgreeting.esp and click create new rule and then click save and exit. Now when you run Boss, you should only have link.esp that is not recognized unless you fixed that earlier to load before your bashed patch. Then you should have 0 unrecognized plugins. Okay, you can go ahead and close Boss GUI for now and navigate back to our optional LOD update folder, number 13, and open up the Object LOD folders. We're going to start with J3's Atlas VWDs, so view when distant. We're going to be using the Cyrodiil Bane installer, an absolutely wondrous mod. Really excited to be using this one. It's a wizard, as you can see, so you just right click, click install, and the wizard will pop up. I highly recommend Performance to start with. If everything runs fine, go ahead and uninstall and reinstall it with the Performance More Rocks, which is what I have chosen to do. Click Next, So you can go ahead and see our selection that the installer auto-selected for us. With the current more rocks checked, I have medium rocks now selected. Now, something to note is you cannot select anything more from this list in the installer, but I'll show you how we can change that here in a second. Click apply these selections, click finish. It's going to install all of them. But what I'm going to do is immediately right click uninstall. And I'm going to select the Skingrad Castle. And then I'm going to right click, go to advanced installation and click install configured. It will install everything that is selected, including the Skingrad Castle. All right, next go to that second folder, open it up, and this is going to be the J3's Atlas VWD2 Shivering Isles installer. In this one, we're just going to right click, click install, and select all. That's what I have chosen. If you have any problems with performance, uninstall these and don't use VWDs, or try less of them with like only vanilla FARs. Select parts individually and select each one that you'd like to really see in your distance. I'm going to go ahead and select all and click next, and it'll auto select everything here. And I'm going to click apply these selections and click finish. Now you can navigate back to our object LOD root folder, and we're going to go into the ULP, in which case I have chosen to make a custom version of it, which you'll see just has the data and the distant LOD meshes, textures, and merged LOD.esm inside the folder. And you can see without this, in the non-custom version, it just doesn't have the data selection. I just like to be extra careful. So what I went ahead and did is I unzipped this. I extracted like this. I opened it up and I made a new data folder like this. And I grabbed everything, put it inside the data folder. I renamed this as a custom folder. And then I right clicked and then I added archive as a zip file. I'm not going to do that again because it's the exact same thing I already have. And delete the original folder. And then you can drag this into Rybash. Make sure merged LOD.esm is selected. Right click and install. This is going to replace some of J3's Atlas VWD, as well as installing some additional files atop it. Alright, once that's finished, that one might take a while. Now you can go to J3's Atlas Ruined Ruins patch. Because we are using the Ruined Ruins textures, I've decided to get the proper VWD for it as well. Huge shoutouts to J3 once again for the amount of work, as well as GBR Plus for the ULP mod that we're going to be using. Just right click, install that, and that will override some of ULP's ruins, as you can see. So I have these in a particular order for us. Alright, next is going to be the Imperial City LOD Performance Edition. This one is actually from Slowpard, who also does the Slow LOD Gen mod that we're going to be using to wrap all this together. Make sure the iclod.esp is selected, right click install. Then we have the file rocks VWD, and I went ahead and did the same thing as before. I unzipped this, made a data folder, as you can see, to put everything in the meshes and textures, and I rezipped that as a custom. And then you can drag that in. After you rezip it, right click install. Alternatively, you can find some install instructions here as well. Alright, next is going to be the Imperial City Tower reinstall. This is super important if you wanted to keep your CatCats version, laser or not. Up to this point, I have opted to remove the laser, as it also fixes the distant LOD flicker. There's a weird flicker that can occur with the reflections with the Imperial City using CatCat's original meshes. So I've opted to use a patch that someone made to remove the laser and the galaxy above the Imperial City Tower, but it also seemed to fix the far NIF mesh, which alternatively you can find my explanation and guide on how to fix the reflection and shadows anyway, if you would like to do that. But this is the time where you want to uninstall the Imperial City Tower we had earlier and reinstall it unless you want the vanilla distant Imperial City Tower. So I'm going to go ahead and install my custom one from earlier in the guide and reinstall it down here. Drag that in, install. I also much prefer the no laser patch, which is beautiful. Okay, so we can drag this in. And it's not letting me drag it into Rybash, which is super weird. I found out if I took the same zip file, copied it, and removed it a layer or a level of folders, pasted it, and then I dragged it into Rybash, that for some reason allowed Rybash to accept it. Very weird. But I want to mention that I just figured that out. We can go ahead and right click and install that. The white gold tower laser removed. If you're wanting yours to also be removed, I'm going to delete the one that I had to remove a level. That was weird. All right, next is optional, as in skip if you skipped Kvatch Rebuilt. This is folder number 7, the KMM Kvatch Rebuilt patches. The first one is going to be no more burned trees, which I love. This removes those burned trees around the area from when we generate the LOD later on. You'll see that they're normal trees from a distance and no longer burned. Make sure the Kvatch Rebuilt no more stupid burned trees, damn it, ESP is selected. Right click and install that. Again, you can skip this if you skipped Kvatch Rebuilt to be extra safe. I would not install that. But if you did, go ahead and follow along. The next one is the KMM Kvatch Rebuilt no more double walls patch, which is very handy, as when generating the LOD there can be double walls, but this is the only issue here. Make sure you only select one of these ESPs, otherwise it won't generate properly. If you are planning on playing the game straight into the main story, just uncheck the Peace ESP and leave it as Siege. If you are planning on changing your loadout mid playthrough, starting Peaceful, and then allowing the Siege to take place through the story, and you're going to be reinstalling and uninstalling these mods for Kvatch Rebuilt to look proper in your world and regenerate your LOD to have your world represent that, then you can install Peace as your first ESP, which is what I'm going to do. For the live series, I'm going to install it with Peace at first until we get to the point in the main story where the siege is happening. In which case, while I'm offline, I will regenerate the LOD with the new install of Kvatch Rebuilt with the no more double walls, damn it, Siege ESP. And I'm also going to uninstall the no more burnt trees, and I'm also going to uninstall the Kvatch Rebuilt no more burned ground that I installed much earlier in this guide. Then I will regenerate Landscape LOD and Object LOD just for the Siege, and then after the Siege is done, I will redo everything again for the Peaceful mode. That's how determined I am. So I'm going to go ahead and install the Kvatch Rebuilt no more stupid double walls Peace. Only install one of these. Right click install. Alright, and next is going to be my mod, Snowy's Water of Cyrodiil LOD VWD. And this is going to be for Cyrodiil, the first one. You can just drag this in, make sure the Water LOD Cyrodiil ESP is active. Right click install. And then you're going to go to the 9th folder for the Shivering Isles Snowy's Water LOD, which will patch both of these regions and instances. Make sure it's selected as the ESP here. Right click and install. And now I'm going to go navigate to my Rybash and look at my mods. And you're going to want to select all these plugins. You're going to see merged LOD.esm. As far as I know, this should be running in the 2nd position. So I'm going to go ahead and make that exception in the boss GUI. If you run into any issues, go ahead and move this down to the position it tells you in slow LOD gen. So go ahead and open up boss GUI, edit user rules. So what you're going to want to do is type in merged LOD.esm, sort item before oblivion.esm. And then you're going to click create new rule. If yours says it needs to be in a different position, and again, you have any issues, go ahead and edit this rule later on. So when you run boss, it'll automatically sort that. Editor Snowy here to quickly have you guys get the merged LOD.esp into your Oblivion data folder before Snowy sorts merged LOD.esp in your load order. So go ahead and open up Object LOD, the folder, and go to slow lod gen, which we haven't extracted yet, but what you can do is just run into the zip, don't extract anything, and you can go into resources and you can just grab this mergelod.esp file and just drag it into your Oblivion data folder, not the root folder, but the data folder. Just drag it in and copy it to your data, and then you'll be able to be caught up with what Snowy is doing here next. Oh, and make sure that you close Boss GUI, save and close it, reactivate this mergelod.esp in your Rybash. Just go activate it in your Rybash, and then reopen your Boss GUI to continue sorting with Snowy in the next segment. Next, if you have the mergelod.esp, go ahead and sort that in the first ESP position. Mine would be after the custom spell icons -obme.esm, and then create new rule. But I also had to select before. So again, I might be saying after by reading the user rules manager, but go ahead and make sure that yours matches this bottom window, the rule editor. If you don't have this, double check you don't run into any issues. Next, go ahead and sort the IC space lod.esp before mergelod.esp. Next, go ahead and sort my water LOD-cyrodiil.esp after the IC lod.esp. But in the rule editor, have it sort before. So we're reading from the bottom up. And then have the water LOD-shiveringisles.esp sort before the water lod-cyrodiil.esp. In the rule editor or in the manager, it'll say after. And then once again, make sure you move your link.esp rule to the very bottom by clicking on it and click move rule down until it's at the very bottom. So have link.esp sorting. In this case, I have it selected as after bashed patch 0.esp. And then click save edited rule in that case, if you moved it. Then you can go ahead and click save and exit, and then you can run boss. You can see my boss report has 0 unrecognized plugins with 96 total. And now it's time to rebuild your bashed patch. And now you have made it to the point where we're just going to generate these details in our world. So go to the 10th folder. For slow lod gen to work, you have to run it anytime you change your load order. I've mentioned it in my mod to make sure we do this. Right click and extract files. You can go and open up this folder, and you're going to see there's a launch slow lod gen.bat. That's what we're going to be running anytime you need to regenerate your object LOD for whatever reason. You can run this. I would recommend making any kind of backups you might need for your object LOD if you have any particular instances of object LOD already rendered. Make sure you back all that stuff up. Now, in my case, I don't need to back anything up, so I'm going to go ahead and run this. A note is if it has trouble initializing or starting, put this in like the games folder, how I have boss GUI, nifscope, where I have those folders, kind of how they're not super deep into a root of a folder. Remove layers from it and relaunch the bat, or put it near your Oblivion. Don't put it in your Oblivion folder. So I'm going to go ahead and try to run this and see if it were successful. Click more info here and hit run anyway. Yeah, so mine ran into that issue. It is unable to find my Oblivion, and so the best way to fix this is going to be taking this. I'm going to go ahead and delete the folder I just extracted. I'm going to copy the zip. And I'm going to just put this next to Oblivion, next to my Steam. So I'm actually going to put it here. And I'm going to make a new folder called Slow Lod Gen. And I'm just going to put it in this folder. Then I'm going to go ahead and right click extract files. I'm going to unzip that. I'm actually glad we ran into the issue so I can show you guys how to fix it. And now it should find my Oblivion just fine by launching Slow Lod Gen Bat. Double click it, more info, run anyway. And just like that, it has now found my Oblivion. This will take multiple minutes to run and let it do its thing. All right, while this finishes, I just want to give a huge shout out to Slowpard, the mod maker for Slow Lod Gen, as this utility is amazing. It has helped me make some beautiful landscapes and change the way that LOD generation works. Very grateful for this tool. All right, once that's done, you can go ahead and read the bottom of that. It says took 251 seconds for mine to complete, but also it's important to make sure mergelod.esm is loaded in position 1, the highest position we can make it behind our oblivion.esm. We'll press any key to continue. And now we can go double check that our Rybash does indeed have everything sorted where we want it. Mine is looking good after we ran all of the boss configurations earlier before doing our slow lod gen. And now we can do our final test. All right, and with that, I also want to mention before we go, I did have a comment that mentioned that the OBSE loader.exe does struggle to run or doesn't work for some people unless they are running it in administrator mode. I haven't had that issue yet, but that might be something that is affecting others. So if you guys want to share that information with your fellow Oblivion modders, please feel free to do so. Also, anyone who sees this, if you guys end up checking out either of my mods, a endorsement, which I can't endorse my own mod as you can see here, but an endorsement can happen 15 minutes after you download any of my files. They are extremely helpful to me, and that would be one way of being able to thank me or anyone who has given me some guidance or advice with this guide series. It'd be really appreciated, and I just want to thank every single person who has come by to listen to this series. I thought episode 6 would be the end, and here we are with episode 7. So maybe we'll have a future update episode. Hey, who knows? Maybe we'll be playing and streaming Skyblivion later this year, or potentially some rumored Oblivion remake. Psh, I don't know, man. Who needs Oblivion remakes when you got this? But look at this. Anyway, I hope everyone has a wonderful start to 2025. Thank you guys for supporting my journey with getting into Oblivion and learning the construction set and just having fun with everything that this world has to offer. I'll see you guys in Nirn, and you all stay frosty. Thank you so much for watching. And if you want to catch our live streams or you want to check out the graphical showcase, those will be thrown up at the end of this video. Thank you guys for hanging out. Peace.